the piece of legislation that I'm going to be talking about, aka Louisiana House Bill 76, this is more of a bipartisan thing than it is a left versus right thing, even though most things are left versus right. In this particular circumstance, this bill was introduced by a Democrat and was supported by mostly Republicans. I mean, 7 Democrats voted yay, 61 Republicans voted yay. 12 Democrats voted nay, 6 Republicans voted nay. So a higher percentage of Democrats voted, against it than for it. But of course, as you see, 7 yay, 12 nay versus 61 yay, 6 nay. It shows you how, lopsided the Louisiana legislature is. And there was, of course, 19 people who were absent. More people were absent than actually cast a vote on this. Nobody abstained. So, but again, it was sponsored by a Democrat, but only 7 Democrats voted for it and 61 Republicans voted for it. So it was, for as much as Louisiana can be bipartisan, it was a little bipartisan. It was more bipartisan than the attempts to say like the Affordable Care Act was bipartisan because one Republican helped to vote it out of committee. That being said, here's the bill text of HB 76. RS 14:43.5.1 is hereby enacted to read as follows. Intentional infection of an incurable sexually transmitted disease. A. Intentional infection of an incurable sexually transmitted disease is when a person has the specific intent to infect another human being with an incurable transmitted disease without the knowing and lawful consent of the victim. The offender knew he or she had an incurable sexually transmitted disease at the time of infection, and the offender engaged in any of the following: sexual intercourse or sodomy with the other individual, selling or donating one's own blood, blood products, semen, tissue, organs, or other bodily fluids, sharing with another individual a hypodermic needle, syringe, or both. B. Whoever commits the crime of intentional infection of an incurable sexually transmitted disease shall be fined not more than $5,000, imprisoned with or without hard labor for not more than 10 years, or both. So that is what the legislation says. That is the legislation as it has been read, as it has been passed by the Louisiana legislature. So you have some people.
Let's talk about this bill.
Let's talk about this. So here's some audio about this bill that people are talking about, and we'll talk about some of the comments that have been given by people who support it and by people who oppose it. Louisiana Trans Advocates is one of the people who oppose this, calling it the STI criminalization bill. Now, when I read that text, it doesn't read to me that individuals are going to be criminalized simply for having an STI. It reads to me that there's more to it than that. But let's listen to what's being said by people who are discussing this with the bill's author and see what they have to say, and we're going to respond as we get to points to respond to.
Let's talk about this bill. First off, what is it?
I was contacted by victims who, of course, had been...
Now, this is Louisiana Representative Pat Moore, a Democrat, the one who sponsored this bill.
...exposed to an incurable disease, and the offender or the partner or the spouse, they knew this and intentionally held this information from them. And that is...
So let's be clear. These are not situations where you happen to have it and you don't know it and you happen to pass it on to somebody. This is an example of when people know that they've tested positive for an STI, don't tell their partners, and end up infecting their partners with that disease or infection or what have you.
The purpose of me filing the bill.
What do you think about that in the first place?
We have very high rates of sexually transmitted infections in Louisiana, but this is not...
All right, so you have very high rates of, this is somebody else talking about this, you have very high rates of STI
Not a consequence of people intentionally exposing others to them as much as it is a consequence of our healthcare system.
And look, we absolutely need a better healthcare system in Louisiana to enable people to have access to better healthcare so they can know if they're infected or not and can get treatment for said infections. I mean, even though there are diseases that are not curable, like HIV/AIDS is not curable, but if you take the appropriate drugs and follow the appropriate regimentation of drugs after you've tested positive for HIV or AIDS, you can actually prevent exposing others to it and live a much longer life than used to ever be able to be lived after getting infected with HIV. But the idea that just because maybe more of our problems and more of the reasons why why any STIs are spreading is because of we need a better healthcare system, that's irrelevant to the idea that people who know that they have an STI and not telling their partners about it. That's completely a different subject, and to conflate the two is problematic.
The lack of access to care that many Louisianians have, and the fact that we don't have very comprehensive sexual health education programs, and so people are already not making well-informed decisions about their sexual health, or at least they aren't encouraged to in the state. And so I think actually the solution to this issue would be improving access to healthcare, as well as
improving access to healthcare doesn't deal with the problem of people who know that they have an incurable STI and who don't disclose it to their partner. This is one of the things, this is an issue where I take big issues with other people on the left, people other than me on the left who argue about this and want to make these arguments, right? The problem is normally we are the ones who stress consent. We are the ones. The Republicans voted for a rapist, somebody who was literally, the judge says we can call it rape, but he was literally found liable, civilly liable, for sexual abuse of E. Jean Carroll. Somebody who admitted on tape, on an audio recording, that he would knowingly and willingly grab people by the hoo-ha, move in on them like a whatever, and not care about their consent. We are the party that pushes for consent. You can't push for consent and say that everybody should consent and have fully informed consent and oppose this. Because if it is not consent, if you know that you have an incurable STI, or even any STI, it is not consent if you then pass it on to somebody else and don't give them the ability to make an informed decision as to whether or not they want to participate in any sexual activities with you, in sharing any needles with you, etc. Hell, when you have, zero viral load after you take the anti-HIV medications, and it's proven that if you are following this regimen, you do not have the ability to pass on HIV to anybody else. But that being said, that's assuming that you're doing it properly. That's assuming that you are getting all of the prescription, you're getting them on time. So even if you are, if you believe yourself to not be someone who can transmit it, it's my opinion that you should still have to disclose that, because you should not get to make that decision for other people as to whether or not they're going to trust that you are doing and taking the medications properly to avoid becoming someone who could, start spreading the virus again. Hell, in my single days, I would make sure to disclose if I felt like I had a cold. Hell, even when with Cassie, with I'm married, and if I have a cold and She wants to do things. I tell her, I have a cold. I don't know if you want me doing X, Y, or Z, because I don't want to pass it on to you. That's what consent is. Telling other people that they might catch something from you and giving them the opportunity to say yes or no to it. And that's not even part of this bill. It's giving somebody a cold isn't part of this legislation. But I think people should go above and beyond what this legislation says and always disclose anything that might be able to be passed on to somebody else. Because you don't get to make those decisions for other people. You can't be on the left. You can't be. I take problems a lot of times when people try and gatekeep leftism. You're a lot of left. You can't be a leftist. You can't. There are certain things that there are exceptions to that rule, where the exception proves the rule. The exception that proves the rule in this particular case is, guess what? If you are saying that people don't have to allow their sexual partners to have informed consent about what they may or may not catch by having sex with you, that's not consent. And you can't be a leftist if you're supporting those sort of things. Period. Let's continue listening to what these people have to say, and we'll read the other things as well.
Reducing stigma around STIs and STDs.
What?
Yeah, okay, reducing. Okay, that's one. I mean, she also said we should help reduce the stigma of having STIs. Fine, I have no problem with reducing the stigma. That doesn't mean you get to have sex with whoever it is you want to have sex with without informing them of what they might catch if they have sex with you. What they risk by having sex with you. Now, again, if you don't know, if you have not had an STI test, if you don't know, then you're not necessarily somebody who's going to be at fault here. But if you know and don't disclose, yeah, go fuck yourself.
What about the people who, I guess, who are born with these incurable STDs?
Now, if you're born with it, of course, I'm not talking about that, but even after years or whatever, I mean, if you're born with it and it's an incurable but manageable, but still you are aware of this. And if your spouse, your partner, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I don't know why this person asked about passing on to somebody, I guess, that you give birth to. That's not part of the legislation. Legislation doesn't say if you give somebody, if you're pregnant and happen to pass on an infection to your kid, that's not under this law. But if you're somebody who was born with it, and you know you're born with it, and then you reach an age where you are sexually, where you start being sexually active, and you don't disclose, that's a problem. Someone in the chat says that, crabs and lice are easier to get rid of. There's no comparison to an STI. I agree with you that there's no comparison between an STI and like pubic lice. That being said, if you know you have it and you don't disclose it, you're a piece of shit. And while the law is not going to cover that particular circumstance, because the law only talks about incurable, and crabs and lice are curable. Hell, there are many things that are treatable with penicillin, like gonorrhea, chlamydia, whatever. I think the law should include those too. It doesn't. But even if you have it, and you knowingly have sex with somebody and don't let them know, you're a piece of shit.
B, if you know that you have this incurable disease, manageable or whatever the case may be, and you did not inform that person, then yes, this would apply to you. But again, I'm not referring to those that are born with it, because it's going to take years, right? I'm assuming. Mm-hmm. You're born with it, but it's going to take some time for that to happen. But again, what I'm talking about in my emails that I'm receiving and so on, they're saying, well, they don't know. They don't know about the HPV. They don't know. Well, this is intentionally. You did not know this. So again, this bill, or what I'm trying to do, will not impact them.
Mm-hmm. And what other loopholes did you see? I know it was amended late last night, and you.
Now, this video is kind of back and forth because it's like is like this one person, Isabella Chang from KTL News Now or whatever. She's going back and forth interviewing the person who drafted the legislation and are supporting it, and then to this other person, Jasmine Carroll from PACE and LCCH member or whatever, who's whatever. So this is now talking to the second person who's giving their opinions about this.
You know, you just read it recently, but what other loopholes did you find quite alarming?
Even, for example, let's say I was having sex with someone and they knew their status. They told me they were living with HPV, and I had no clue that I was already living with HPV. So there's a chance that I could have acquired that from a previous relationship, but because I hadn't been tested quite yet, I could assume that I had transmitted that infection from my partner. And even if my partner discloses that to me, let's say we don't have it written down or there's not a witness, it would be very difficult to prove that my partner had disclosed that to me and I had agreed and consented to that interaction. And so there's just a lot of, I guess, loopholes in this bill that are...
You know what? Then if you're that concerned with that, get it in writing. Get it in writing. Say, I have disclosed to this person that I have this particular disease and that I'm consenting to it. Write it down. If that's your concern, do that. Make sure to cover your ass.
Concerning.
Are the victims then monitored themselves? So now that they have the sexually transmitted disease that's incurable, are they then also being monitored as well, or is that redacted too?
Who's being monitored? There's nothing in this legislation that I'm seeing that monitors people with STIs.
Well, they're going to have to be held responsible.
Now, will they be held responsible if they know that they have an STI and then don't disclose to other people? Yes. Because why is it okay? Why would it be okay or not okay for a person to transmit it to person A, or person A to transmit it to person B, but somehow okay for person B to not? They don't have to disclose to C. No, it sucks that it happened to person B. That person A should have disclosed and should have given them the ability to give consent to the sexual activities that took place. But that doesn't make it okay to then push it on this person C.
Now they're going to have to be accountable too. So you have an incurable disease. You're now in the same boat as the offender. If you're going to have a relationship, then of course you got to do just what you're asking me to hold them accountable. So you're in the same boat now.
And going back to the last thing we were talking about in this show. I mean, you might think it's not related, but again, if people were altruistic, you wouldn't need these type of laws. Just like if corporations were altruistic, you wouldn't need trial attorneys. But if people were altruistic and people did the right thing all the time, you wouldn't need these laws. But people are out there knowing that they have an incurable STI and are not telling their partners. And if you don't think that's problematic, go fuck yourself again.
You got to inform because you know. So you got to make sure your partner or whoever is aware of your situation. And I think what is happening with the victims, they ended up in a situation where now they are having to do this, which they would not have been in that predicament if they had known.
You know, LCCH has talked about how they are fearful that it'll disincentivize people actually getting tested. Can you comment a little bit more about why it would?
There is actually another Louisiana Democrat from New Orleans who made that very just similar argument that is being asked about right now. That if you pass this law, it's going to disincentivize people from getting tested. So basically, you're saying that because some people are scumbags and they're, they will knowingly and willingly transmit STIs to people if they have it and won't disclose what their current infection status is, that these people are not going to get tested. I would make the argument that some of these people who don't care about whether or not they're going to pass it on, most of them probably don't know anyway because they don't care about getting STI tests to begin with. So yeah, you're going to miss people. But there are responsible people who are sexually active, who are going to get STIs, who will then find out, oh, I have an STI. And then this is basically saying, if you find out that you have an STI, you must disclose to your future sexual partners. Why is this a terrible, horrible thing? Why is this something that people on the left would fight against? This doesn't make any sense to me. And again, if you're on the left and you disagree with me and you think you have a cogent point, not today, because again, shorter show, we're not going to have probably phone lines today. Call in Monday, Wednesday, next week. Let me know. Let me know why you think I'm wrong. And again, I'm open to being wrong. I'm open to the idea that I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, if you convince me, I will say that I'm convinced. I will change my mind. Even though it sounds like I might not, because I think that people who knowingly pass on STI to people without giving them, the knowledge that they are infected, and as such allow them to consent to whether or not they want to take the risk themselves, I believe that they're pieces of shit. But you can still let me know why you think that this law would be harmful to other people. And if there's something I've not thought about, I'll consider it. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm having a hard time considering that I might be wrong, because these people are basically saying we shouldn't force people to disclose because some people might abuse it. What?
Probably scare someone to get tested.
What makes it difficult is I could also just decide not to get tested and still spread it regardless, because I'm not getting tested and I'm not taking the medications that I need. But at least I don't have to constantly disclose that to somebody. And I think that that is part of the issue is when I spoke about my testimony at the time, I spoke about how it could affect women in the military who are experiencing intimate partner violence. There was another woman who gave a testimony and said that she had disclosed her status to her husband when she was living with HIV, and he threatened to harm her if she had decided to leave, or he threatened to continue to harm her if she decided to leave. And if she did leave, then she had to prove that she had disclosed her status to him. And these are very personal and private and intimate conversations that people should be having with each other. I think
So we shouldn't pass a legislation that would require people from knowingly, because some people might be abusive with it. No, be tougher on the abusers. And again, if you feel that if you're in an abusive relationship and you say, and you think that, and you somehow, get HIV, and then your abuser is like, well, if you leave me, I'm going to tell you that, I'm going to tell people and lie to you that you didn't disclose. There are ways to record that to basically protect yourself. Protect yourself. But it doesn't excuse. I've seen other arguments, and I don't know if this one has been made yet if this one will be made in this video or not. I haven't seen this video yet that I'm playing, or the audio that we're playing. There are people who are basically making the argument, that what about a rapist who rapes somebody and then who knowingly has an STI and then passes it on to the rapist? Then could they get in trouble? No. Because again, the law requires that you willingly, knowingly, and willingly. If you're a victim of sexual assault, you're not doing it willingly. Therefore, the law doesn't apply to you.
When it comes to accountability, yes, I believe that people should be accountable. I don't believe that people should be accountable for living with a disease that they themselves did not intentionally acquire.
I agree. This law doesn't do that.
And so I think holding people accountable starts with strengthening the way that we protect victims and survivors of sexual abuse and assault. And I don't believe that we are already doing our due diligence in that field. And so I think that that's...
But by these people who are saying that you shouldn't have to disclose, I can't imagine what it's like. I mean, I guess I can't imagine to have something happen to me that I consent to. I did not consent to. I've discussed that on the show already as a kid, from what things that happened to me as a kid. And if things that happened to me as a kid were worse than what actually took place, And if that abuser happened to give me something that would have lasted me a lifetime, the argument of, well, I was a victim, so I shouldn't have to disclose my STI status to future sexual partners, is bullshit. That I'm a victim sucks. If that would have happened to me and I said, well, because I'm a victim, I shouldn't have to tell people, that would make me a shitty person too.
That's where the accountability really should start.
I guess, how do you think we move forward then?
Yeah, so I believe that.
And this person's on a news station and they have this terrible interview. I'm a much better person at editing video than these people are. How the hell are these people professionally employed? What? Let's continue.
We have the same intentions, and intention is the word of the day, I guess.
No, you don't. You don't have the same intentions if you're trying to make an argument that people who have an STI shouldn't have to disclose to people.
And so I believe that we all want justice. That was something that was constantly said.
Do you really? Do you really want justice in all these circumstances? If you're making an argument that people shouldn't have to disclose their STI status to potential sexual partners, you're not for justice, at least in that particular area.
In the courtroom when I was there was that these survivors deserve justice and that we deserve justice. And I agree. But I think as the Criminal Justice Committee, it is their responsibility to think critically about what justice means and what that looks like. And that doesn't necessarily always mean sending people to prison or punishment.
I agree. Justice doesn't always mean sending people to prison. I mean, this law also allows for monetary fines, but it doesn't even require fines. Justice can be in many shapes and forms. But if you're out there knowingly and willingly having sexual intercourse with people and not telling them that you could be passing on to them, if they're consenting to you to have sex with you, but you don't tell them the information that they might need that might make them say no, that I don't want to do it, you don't have the right to have sex with anybody else that, whatever. Arguments that are made that basically allow people to not have to disclose what their STI status is basically saying that those people are entitled to have sex with whoever they want to and not disclose and not give them the full picture. That's not consent. You're doing consent wrong.
Punishing them. I think justice can be healthcare. Justice is providing access to resources and informing the public about their sexual health, and also promoting vaccines. Our health department was recently discouraged from doing that this year, and we have an HPV vaccine. And if we could prevent...
And yes, we have an HPV vaccine, and I'm making sure that my kids get it. And everybody should make sure that their kids get it too, unless they're medically incapable of getting it, because it does protect against many forms, or the more prevalent forms of HPV. It doesn't protect against all of them. It can't stop you from getting all of them, but it'll stop you from getting a lot of them. And if somebody violates your kids, absolutely, you should be getting it for them, because it'll give them one more barrier of protection. That being said, if the person gets an HPV vaccine and if a person, ends up getting an incurable disease anyway, that they shouldn't then be able to say that, oh, I don't have to disclose. Imagine being somebody and you are willingly having sex with this person unknowing that they have a known STI and they happen to pass it on to you. Imagine then thinking, well, then I should get to be able to not disclose to others too. Two wrongs don't make a frickin' right.
The existence and the prevalence of these disease states within our communities, then that is justice. And so I think that we're thinking about the right things, but I don't know if we're doing the right things.
Well, allowing people to get away with not disclosing their status is not justice. Period. All right, let's see again. You have the Louisiana Trans Advocates, an organization who I would normally, and this is also a part of LCCH, the person that this individual was a member of. They're making arguments on their website. They say in partnership with LCCH, we need to help one last time to stop HB76, an STI criminalization bill that would criminalize people living with STIs. No, it wouldn't. You're lying. And this is a problem. It's a problem that I have typically on the right. is that the people on the right will lie, or like they'll believe Donald Trump, and Donald Trump tells a lie, and they'll be like, and the conservatives will be like, well, what if he tells the truth the next time? No. When you lie, you help to make yourself less believable. They're lying right here. It harms their cause. I'm not going to be against the Louisiana Trans Advocates Organization because they happen to say this one particular thing incorrectly, but they're spreading falsehoods here. See, unfortunately, this bill has passed the House and now is in the Senate. Potentially, it last stop of heading to the governor's desk. Please take action one last time to help keep this bill from becoming law and protect your communities from what? What are you protecting them from? You're making it more likely that your communities will be infected by somebody who knowingly and willingly passes on STI to other people because they know that they have it and they don't tell their partners. And don't allow their partners to take an action that has informed consent. If you don't have informed consent, you don't have consent. Your actions have helped us get this bill to a better place, but criminalizing STI is not effective. They're not criminalizing STI. Stop spreading falsehoods. Look, maybe they're not lying. Maybe they have a problem reading. I don't know. So we remain in opposition to the bill. HPV, herpes, HIV, hepatitis B affect Louisianans from all walks of life. Criminalizing these conditions, you're not criminalizing the conditions. You're criminalizing knowingly having sex with somebody and not informing them that you know that you have one of these conditions, would subject hundreds of thousands of people to extreme penalties. Are hundreds of thousands of people infected with these STI? Are hundreds of thousands of people not telling their partners that they have these STIs? No? Then you're not telling the truth. This bill only targets those who know their status. How are you supposed to target the people who don't know their status? How? This is a very conservative mindset type of way of thinking. Not in that conservative, Republicans did support this bill, but the idea that because you can't get every one of them, you should do nothing about it. That is the way conservatives think. Liberals, leftists, progressives will think, let's do something that helps the most people possible. Conservatives will say, we shouldn't do anything because it doesn't help everybody. Congratulations, y'all. You have officially joined in the low information voter, the poorly educated realm of politics by embracing the idea that if it doesn't help everybody, it helps nobody. This is the same type of logic that conservatives use to be against the COVID vaccine. They said nobody should take the COVID vaccine because it doesn't stop you from getting it. Even though it could prevent you from getting it, it doesn't stop everybody from getting it because some people who have the vaccine still got COVID. That's not logical. That's not logical whatsoever. But they're making the same type of argument here, that because it doesn't help, it doesn't prevent every single case of transmitting STIs from taking place, that that means it's bad. HB76 threatens up to 10 years in prison and mandatory sex offender registration. I didn't read the mandatory sex offender registration, but maybe I missed that. For people living with these health conditions, it won't make us safer. It will re-traumatize survivors, increase stigma, and open the door to coercion, violence, and prosecution of people simply seeking care. It's not going to punish anybody for simply seeking care. It's going to punish people if they have it, regardless of whether or not they seek care, if they don't tell their partners that they have it. And if somebody can manage to draw the line of, you knew, then we had sex, and you didn't tell me, well, guess what? And what this law might do, this law might inconvenience some persons who happen to test positive for these sexually transmitted infections by requiring them to take maybe an extra step to say, look, I am telling you that I have tested positive for this thing, and I am letting you know before we have sex. Sign here to confirm that you understand this. Oh well. I'm not weeping for y'all that you might have to take an extra step to confirm that you've given people that consent. Look, again, I don't need such a thing to tell me what to do, to tell me to do the right thing. Because as I said before in the video, if I know I have a cold, I will tell my wife. A simple cold. A cold is not incurable. A cold goes away for most people. Some people who are immunocompromised can have issues with the viruses that they catch. My wife's immunocompromised. Another reason why I tell her. But even if she wasn't immunocompromised, I would say, look, I have a cold. You might not want to kiss me. And typically when I have some sort of viral infection like that, like a respiratory infection, like a flu or a cold or COVID, I would let her know. And then she wouldn't kiss me. Which is good, because I don't want to pass anything on to her. But, but even if I was single and it was a complete stranger, I'd be like, look, I feel like I have a cold coming on. I want to let you know and give you the opportunity to say yes or no before we do anything else. And that's just a cold. I don't need the law to have me act right. Good people don't need the law to have them act right. Bad people do. That's why Republicans want to criminalize things, because they can't control themselves from the things that they think are wrong. That's why they need to criminalize these things. This article continues. While HB76 claims to focus on intentional harm, its language is dangerously broad. It is not. We just read it. It is not dangerously broad at all. Intentionally transmitting. Knowingly and intentionally. Two strong words there. Strong words. Nobody has better words. Unless they disclose their status to every future partner for the rest of their lives. Anyone living with STIs could face prosecution. Yes! That should not be that dramatic of a thing. That should not be shocking. It's what everybody should do. If you have an STI, you should do that. You shouldn't need the law to tell you. But again, some people do. Because some people will not disclose, knowing that they have these infections. It creates the dangerous take the test, risk arrest environment that will scare people away from healthcare. No, it doesn't. Because if you took the test and found out that you had something, just disclose. Can anybody who opposes this legislation for these reasons show me, give me examples about these sky is falling type scenarios that these people are describing right now? In 2023, the legislature's own H.R. 130 task force warned that Louisiana's outdated HIV criminalization laws already hurt public health and disproportionately affect Black, LGBTQ+, low-income communities. HB76 will only expand those harms. Are you making the argument that we shouldn't disclose? Again, if you're making the argument that you should not have to disclose your STI status to all of your potential partners, you're a piece of shit. And I've said that a lot this video. This might be one of the videos where I curse the most. But if you are making the argument that nobody should have to disclose their STI status to other people, you are a piece of shit. Period. Make your voice heard today. I'm making my voice heard today right now. And maybe I'll go ahead and I'll contact these people and give them the opportunity to change my mind sometime next week. But I just heard about this today, and I didn't have the time to do more than that. But I was pissed off when I started hearing the fact that there are people who claim to be on the left, who claim to support marginalized and oppressed communities, who thinks it's perfectly okay to let them know that, oh, you don't have to disclose. Yeah, go fuck off. Where did we hear the argument before of I'm not responsible for the health care of others? It's the conservatives who made that argument during COVID-19 when they refused to socially distance, when they refused to mask up, where they fought vaccinations. Yes, you should be responsible to prevent yourself from knowingly and even unknowingly transmitting things to other people. But in this particular case, this legislation only deals with the people who knowingly transmit infections to other people. So yes, when it comes down to, there are many cases there where people will be have STIs transmitted to them, and those people don't know, their partners didn't know that they had an STI, and it just happens. And it sucks if it happens. It absolutely sucks. That being said, if you know, you should have to tell them. You should have to let them know too.